Today's episode is brought to you by The Riveter. The Riveter is Seattle's newest network for entrepreneurs and changemakers, and the only collaborative workspace built by and for women. Located in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, you can visit theriveter.co to sign up for a tour and see more details on membership, events, and wellness experiences. Check out theriveter.co today.
Live from the Riveter in Seattle, Washington, this is the Career Cue. Our guests tonight are Lora Poepping, Alan Andersen, and Nancy McSharry Jensen. Here's your host, Dana Redmond.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to invite you to take a seat, and we're going to get started soon. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Dana Redmond, and I will be the moderator of this lovely, fun panel for tonight. So, by way of introduction, I am a co-host of a podcast called The Career Cue. My fellow co-host is over there, Stacy. Dave, our producer, is behind us, where he always makes us sound really good. And so if you don't know what the Career Cue is, the Career Cue is a podcast that is all about career development. We give you interviews and content from great subject matter experts, like all these folks have recorded with us before, everything to do with careers. And so I really encourage you to go out there and find us. It's called the Career Cue, and we are on all the places you'd find podcasts. An interesting thing about podcasts is they're not known to keep going for a very long time. So we just recently, last week, published our 50th episode of the podcast. It's a pretty big milestone in the podcast world to keep going for that long. And actually, our 50th podcast guest is right there. Hey, Tim, give us a wave. So we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do to celebrate our 50th release of a podcast. And we thought, well, let's do something different. Let's take a recorded podcast and host an in-live person event for it. Turn it a little bit on its head. And so that's how we came up with this event. So we are having a talk today all about the leadership of you. And so before we get started, I want to do a couple of things. I want to give a few thank yous. One, a call out to the Address Winery back there, serving some lovely wine. So back there, they're located in Woodinville, in case anybody needs to find them. I also want to thank Madras Kitchen for the lovely catering that they've got for us tonight. And Karen Jussel is doing photos. She's somewhere around. Oh, there she is. Hello, Karen. Perfect. And then last but not least, I really want to thank the Riveter for hosting us here. So how many people, this is your first time in the Riveter? Wonderful. Well, welcome. On behalf of the Riveter, I say welcome. If you don't know what the Riveter is, it is this great co-working space that's been open, Debbie, 2 months now? Yes. About 2 months. So, and they are just killing it. It's a fun space. They've got just a ton of open working space. They have some dedicated desks downstairs. And then the other cool thing that I think about it is they have a neat just community membership. Which is what I became a member of. But it gives you that space where maybe you don't need a desk to sit at, but you just want to be part of like a work community, a place where you can come to events and, sort of feel a part of that if you're a work from home kind of person. So I love it. So welcome to the Riveter, and thank you very much, Debbie, for hosting us tonight. So tonight we are going to be talking all about the leadership of you, and we have this lovely esteemed panel up here. So I'm going to let each of them actually introduce themselves. So Lora, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm Lora Poepping, and I am the founder and president of Plum Coaching and Consulting. We're a firm that has two distinct arms. One is we do job search coaching. We take what we know about how people are hired and reverse engineer it for our clients. And we also do resumes and LinkedIn profiles and anything having to do with changing your career, including transition career coaching. And then we also have on-demand small business human resources. So clients who are from 4 employees up to 100 employees. And we provide on-demand services to those folks. And we've been in business for about 6 years. And there's so many people here I recognize, and this is so great to be on this panel. Thank you.
I am Alan Andersen and am a partner in a leadership development firm called Shondell Group. And similar to you, we just want to be helpful. And usually our help comes by the way of helping.
We don't really want to be helpful.
Oh, you don't? Okay. we want to help people learn to take personal accountability, learn how to grow trust, learn how to ultimately lead themselves, which if you are under the age of, we could make this really hard. If you're under the age, if you're in your 20s or younger, that's a very much a dying art these days. And so ultimately we want to help folks learn to lead themselves.
My name's Nancy McSharry Jensen, and I'm the program director and CEO. That just sounds so funny. Of Reboot Seattle, and we're a program designed for women who have taken a career break and want to get back to work. So we provide tools, training, connections, and networking opportunities for people who have stayed home to take care of their health or their elderly parents, but most of the time, their kids. And we have run 3 proof of concepts, and we're running a 4th. We actually are housed here at the Riveter. We're completely mission aligned. It's our single biggest investment. It's very exciting. And we've had the opportunity to run almost 100 women through our program so far, and it's so inspiring to see how people start and they're very tentative about, well, what am I going to do and how am I going to get in? And at the end, they're ready to go. And some are here in the audience, which I'm really glad to see. And the rest of my life, I also serve as an account director for Sterling Communications down in Los Gatos. I live up here, but I work for them. And so I love things like software-defined data storage and the Internet of Things. I really get excited about that stuff. And I have 2 kids. I have a 6-and-a-half-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I have to go to kindergarten and 5th grade graduation tomorrow.
Yay! Great. Thank you. You know, there's a lot that has been written about leadership, and a lot of it centers around leading other people. There's all sorts of schools of thought and different practices that you can put in place. But tonight what we really want to talk about is how you lead yourself. Because I really believe that to sort of attain the goals you want to in life, you have to think about leading yourself the same way that you would lead a team or an organization through to a bigger goal. So you're going to have to overcome adversity. You're going to have to keep yourself motivated. You got to hold yourself accountable. Sort of all those things that you think about that leaders need to do. And so tonight we're going to talk about how you do that with yourself. So we've got our lovely panel back up here on stage with me. And so I'm going to kick out the first question to them. Really, we want to see you, Laura. Okay. So can you tell us about a time in your own life where you've had to lead yourself? Kick us off, Laura?
No.
It's yes and.
Yes and. We just learned this. Make me look good.
Yeah, so 6 years ago, I started my own company. And when I started my own company, let me just start out by saying I have a master's degree in higher education administration. Anyone else have that? No, it's very esoteric. And I did not have an MBA. And when I launched my company, I launched it very small. It was just me. And then slowly over time, it became too much for me to handle, and I needed to bring people on. Karen Mers, right here, was one of my very first people that I brought on. Brought on a resume writer, and then a LinkedIn person, and then I just kept adding to it. And the whole time I kept doing it, I never once stopped and said to myself, you can't do this. I just said to myself, it's happening very organically. I'm going to learn as I go, and I know one of our questions is about learning. And I had to lead myself by saying, why not? And because when I launched my company, it was about servant leadership. It was about seeing myself as someone trying to do good in this world for my clients, for my coaches, for my consultants, and that became the North Star for me. And then it was in service to something, and then I couldn't give up on it. The end.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So this is great that we're sitting next to each other. We're so similar. Great hair, other things.
You're so much cooler looking than me.
I'm going to be on the other end of the spectrum of not only do I not have an undergraduate or a graduate degree, I don't have my undergraduate degree, and I have successfully dropped out of college. And I think for me, there were a number of times where that reality became a hurdle that was, at the end of the day, an unnecessary hurdle that I put into place. And it came to a head when my first client, who was working for Microsoft with a Princeton degree and was considering going to Stanford next for his PhD, we basically had this dialogue where the reality is I had not understood that it's not necessarily, there is a level of competency we each need to have. But what we have forgotten, because we live in a smart day and age, that what you have and nobody else has. And so if you can start to understand your experience, start to understand where you can add value to people, it's not, and I've said this probably too much, and I'm sorry, I feel like Stacy may punch me in the throat somehow. I don't know where she's at. I keep telling her this. It's not how do you make $1 million, it's how do you help 1 million people. So whatever that looks like for you, you need to figure out where you can add more value than you're going to take in payment. Whatever that looks like. It doesn't matter if you're an individual contributor or you have your own business. So now, in a lot of ways, so I'm a partner in a leadership development firm, as I alluded to earlier. Were there hurdles? For sure. Do degrees help you in certain areas? Formal education pieces that I probably struggled with more than maybe I needed to, and maybe I had a longer track, but I was focused on the wrong thing. The question I would ask you to walk away from here and consider is, what experiences are unique to you that you can start to understand and tease out and develop where you can help other people who have that same need? Are we not between 6 to 7 billion now people in this planet? So somebody needs what you have. And so instead of being your own hurdle in the days where it feels like, I'm just not good enough, okay, maybe you need to grow in something. What I am not advocating for is you haphazardly go out and just say, I'm going to be a life coach, or I'm going to be a leadership coach. Please don't do that. Figure out yourself. You need to have a high level of awareness. With that awareness, then you can figure out where. So that's just the other side of the spectrum.
Wonderful. Thanks, Al. Nancy, what about you? Can you tell us about a time when you had to lead yourself?
Sure. My path and approach is totally different than yours. I worked for other companies for a really long time, including IDG and Microsoft, for UW, Connors Publishing. And I took a 4-year break to take care of my family. And when I went back, I went on a series of interviews, and there were a couple of situations. One where I went through 5 interview loops and got to the CEO, who then looked at his cell phone for 20 minutes and said, yeah, you haven't worked in 4 years, thanks. And I ran a business. I worked on SharePoint at Microsoft, and I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I have run a business 5 times the size of your stupid little startup, and it made me angry. And so my leadership, I guess, is focused on that, because I thought, this is wrong. This is totally wrong. And then at the same time, I was also in the bathroom Googling things. So I'm like, what is Box? I don't know. And so I took a training course down in Silicon Valley called Reboot Accelerator. And I had been talking to people up here, and I talked to the founders, and I said, there's a huge need for this in Seattle, and here we are a year later. We've had almost 100 people go through. So mine was fueled by anger. I'm Irish.
I love that. So it's interesting to hear, right? So all of your different stories of where you've led yourself comes from maybe doubting yourself and getting over it. And yours was, hey, let's just go. And you didn't put any barriers in front of yourself, and you just kept going. And yours is like, I'm not going to put up with that, right? So all the different places where you can start with leading yourself, but you're still going through it. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, where and how do you start leading yourself? Like, what was when you were ready to either start your business or to sort of keep going? Or you like, where do you start with yourself? What was that mental model you were going through with yourself?
Oh, I'll start on this because I mean I make lists. Who makes lists? And every job I have ever had, including this one, I do pros and cons. And I sat down and I have it on my desk at home. What are the things I like to do, and what are the things I don't like to do? And I totally made a list. Here are the things I like. Here are the things I don't like. And I put all the professional things and all of the volunteer things and all of the stuff at home. And it turned out there's a pattern. And some of the things that I really like to do is I like to work with lots and lots of people. And I like being out in the community. And so I like spending time working with people. And I also like using my technical skills. And so I kind of came up with this idea of I want to do a little of this and a little of this and a little of this, and I do not want to be locked in an office. And then there's the stuff I don't want to do. I like to focus on the stuff I do want to do.
What I did was I had actually met with a girlfriend of mine, if anyone knows Mary Beth Maines, and she is a coach. And she and I were having a cocktail, and maybe it was our second cocktail, maybe. And she asked me, after being a director of recruiting for a startup, what do you think you want to do? And I said, well, what I really love to do is coach people on how to do their job search more effectively, because I keep treating people to these cups of coffee for free and telling them what they're doing wrong with their job search, because I was a recruiter for 20 years, and they do it, and it works. And so I'd like to do it. And she said, you should just do it. And I said, no, I can't do that, because that's a favor, not a business. And she said, why can't it be a business? And I just go, because I don't really know what to do with a business. And she goes, you just have to set your intention. And so I went back the next day to the place where I was working, this aviation technology startup, and I knew I was going to leave. And I gave notice, and I said, I'm going to start my own company that coaches people on how to effectively execute their job search. And I just threw it out there. It's like saying, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. And then everyone knows that next time they see me, I hope I'm going to lose 10 pounds. So I just sort of outed myself and said, this is what I'm going to do. And then I just started doing it, like opening a checking account and naming the company and getting a business license and a UBI number. And I just started making inroads into doing it. Nancy's shaking. She's like, yeah, that's what I do. And you just start doing it. And if you out it to everyone, if you tell people and you set your intention, it's really crazy. But people kind of go, whatever happened to your company? I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it. And then it makes you feel committed to following through on the things you said you were going to do.
I think for me, there was a realization, and I did not. So in learning to lead myself, I didn't know how to put it this way, but I do now from learning the long way. So here's a short. Most of us are more scared of fear than we are of inaction. You should be deathly afraid of inaction more so than fear. And instead of being fearless, we just need to learn to fear less. And I think there's an element in that space where how many of us would stand up and say we're perfect? None of us. I mean, I'm so grateful for our exercises because it reminds us in this room we have 40 people cheering us on. But instead of being candid and open and having somebody validate you or tell you, it's great that you want to do that, but you're not ready, we're scared of fear. So I think for me there was a switch that got flipped because of our circumstances, pregnant with our second kiddo, fired from a consultant at Microsoft, had already gone through layoffs in 2008, which ended up in foreclosure. And so it was like, well, my life can't get any worse, I guess, outside of debt. So I need to get my act together. And so there's an element where when you start to pause, which we're not great at this in our society, and we just really start to observe our thoughts, start to see, again, kind of going back to that awareness, what is it that I'm actually fearful of? And then we can actually put it down on paper, or we can talk to somebody, and that outside piece can say, hey, you're great at this, go after that. Or,
I think that's so right. That's so right. I mean, it's been a real adventure starting up a new business. But you're right, because the biggest fear is, oh my God, what if I don't do it? What if it fails? Okay, you're not going to be on the street, right? Maybe you will.
Wonderful. So that's so interesting. So I want to talk a little bit more about failure, because it feels like that fear of failure and leading yourself through failure or perceived failure is an important part of this. So what's your thoughts on, can somebody successfully fail?
I fail every day, and I love to fail. I call myself the human bumper car, because I try something new all the time. And when it doesn't work, I go, oh, ouch, okay, well, that was a bummer, and pull back and try something new. And I'm never afraid to like reach out to people I don't know. Just yesterday, I reached out to Doug Baldwin of the Seahawks, just saying. He has a company that he started, and I thought, there's some synergies there. Maybe I could reach out to him. And what's the worst thing? The worst thing that could happen is I tried, it didn't work, that's not going to work, I'm going to try something else. I have had, in my practice, I came up with this brilliant strategy that Plum was going to supply or be a provider of trailing spouse services. So to companies that had moved someone out, like, Amazon or whatever, we would support their spouses. And I thought that was a brilliant strategy, and I even joined this thing called the Pacific Northwest Relocation Council, which is mainly people like Grable and moving companies, and they help people settle in and move. And those are the people that I had to impress, and they were people who didn't even get me at all, didn't understand me at all. And I worked it hard, and it didn't work. And I just went, no, I'm not going to continue to beat my head against the wall. I'll just do something else. And I did. And I just think the most beautiful thing about starting a business is if you have low ego and you don't see this as a reflection of your capability, but see it as the idea that some products work, like an iPhone, and some products don't, like Zune. Sorry if you're a Zune person. But you know what? It didn't close down Microsoft's doors to do Zune. So it's okay, and you're going to learn so much. I love it. I love when something doesn't work. I know that seems kind of masochistic, but I really do.
Well, let's prove your point. So let's all do a quick, I'm going to borrow from Bridget. We're going to do, so everybody raise your hand. That means all of us. Okay, leave your hand up if when you were taught to tie your shoelaces the first time you succeeded. None of us, right? I mean, so we have this amnesia that failing isn't part of the process, and in reality it is. Failure is simply feedback. And instead of taking something personal, we need to learn, okay, yes, painful, hurts so good, what can I learn and adjust? And if we can just remember that failure is feedback, that's how we could potentially look at failure.
I goof up every day. Sometimes I goof with the kids, sometimes I goof at home, sometimes I goof with the business. And when I say goof, I mean another 4-letter word. And I think that when I think about it, I go, okay, when do I need to go back and say, all right, this just didn't work, and I'm just going to let it go? When do you have to go back and say, you know what, I hurt your feelings, and I'm really sorry? And when do you go and you say, this didn't work, and it's on you, and this is what you need to do? That's the hardest. That's the hardest.
So how do you do that with yourself sometimes? Talk to me about that.
Personal accountability.
Yeah. How do you do that?
I think it's personally, as I said, I'm an Irish Catholic girl from Boston, right? I don't like talking about my feelings. Having said that, I am very clear, Deanna, about what, at this stage in my life, what's important to me, what do I want to do, and what do I not want to do. And if it's not on my I don't want to do it list, I don't. All right, so I just go, for right now, I want to run Reboot and see how far I can take it. I want to do some marketing with these really nerdy projects. I want to be home at 2 to take care of my kids. I want to see my husband on a date at least twice a month, sometimes more. Does it fall into those 4 categories? No, I don't do it. And so people will say, oh, can I have a meeting with you to talk about blah? I think, is it in one of those 4 categories? And I say, gosh, you know what? I'm really busy. And then people will say, oh, can I talk with you for a couple of hours about blah, blah, blah? I'm like, no, I do 25-minute meetings. So I have 5 minutes to get ready for the next one. I'm nicer than that. Sometimes. No, I'm very, very clear with myself. And it took a little time. I had to really sit down and say, what do I want? What do I don't want? It all came from that stupid list of here's what I like and here's what I don't like.
Great, and then you hold yourself accountable to that. What about you guys? Let's talk about how do you hold yourself accountable to doing the things you say you're going to do? Like, what's your strategy?
Oh, that's a hard question, and you even gave us the questions beforehand. You'd think I would have prepped. How do I hold myself accountable? I know myself and what I'm capable of. And a lot of the stuff that I have to do is really hard because people who work with Plum are often in a state of anxiety. And sometimes I have to say, I've fired clients before. I actually had to fire a client today. And I have to hold myself accountable by saying that this business is in service to our clients. And in service to the women and men, one man, who work for me, with me. And if it isn't serving that and making me happy, then I don't want to really do it. Now, that's not to say that all of us don't have to do things we don't want to do, like pay taxes and stuff like that. But I think that for me, accountability is knowing that I have responsibility to make life better for the people around me.
That's good. I think those are great points. I'll flip it a little bit to say it's a lot. If we think about it, accountability or discipline or things like that, those are a byproduct. And what are they a byproduct of? Well, it's understanding priorities, it's understanding your true north, it's understanding what your responsibility is. And so when there is a very clear, when you have crystal clarity on the focal point with whatever your goal is or your objectives or those things, then you can start to do some of the practical things that we usually want to hear, which is how do you keep yourself accountable? Well, yes, so I have a coach. I have people that I've got my own, board of directors where I've got mentors in certain areas. And so, sharing those things. I think on a granular level, though, what it looks like is understanding your wiring. And I'm going to simplify this concept, which probably you guys are already familiar with. But our brain's energy source to make decisions is shared with us taking action. Okay, so you having to think through something is pulling from the same energy for you to go and take action. And so, for example, everybody knows Steve Jobs basically wore the same black turtleneck and Levi's, and it wasn't the exact same one. He had like a dozen pairs, but it was one micro way where he could gain back saving some energy because he knew precisely what he was going to wear. And it's those types of things where, so for me, practically every night, I lay my clothes out because I get up between 4:30 and 5 so that I can go through my progression. And it's really remembering why I'm doing things. I used to be the funnest guy at the party, and I used to love sleeping in and those things, and my priorities have shifted. And when I look back, I didn't really know my priorities. And so when you don't know your priorities, we start to have this distortion, and we start to make decisions in the moment. And if we're honest, nobody wakes up at 4:30 and says, hey, this is a great idea. It's usually like snooze. But if I know ahead of time, okay, this is what my ideal week looks like, this is my rhythm, these are my priorities, then what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up for a win so that we have ways and means for us to remain responsible, for us to meet those priorities so that we know the long game. And it really comes back down to, do you know yourself, how you're wired, and some of those different pieces. One side note, part of the reason I'm sharing this piece is it was really hard for me early on. I had a handful of leaders, many of them were less helpful than not, and it was usually, hey, I just do this. I'm just a morning person. Great for you. I am not a morning person. And so help me know how to do that. Like, how can I practically do that? So, there's a lot of information out there. Do you know your why, which I would say is equivalent to your true north or your priorities or those different pieces. So I think maybe that's kind of the flip side to it.
Can I make one more comment? Money is also very important. Money is very important. And one of the things that I get a lot of people asking me to coach them on their businesses, starting small businesses. That's a very common request of me. I wish I could keep it to 25 minutes, Nancy. I wish I was better at that. But one of the things
I'll text you.
Yeah. One of the things that I always tell people is if you're going to start something, be prepared to not make money right away. And if you need to make money right away, you're gonna be let down. Now there are exceptions. There's a bell curve, and some people make a lot of money, and some people make zero. But one of the things I hold myself accountable for is I need to make money. And while I'm very giving of my time, oftentimes people want to pick my brain, which really hurts and is expensive to me. And just because you want to have coffee with me, like Nancy's talking about, I would love to do that. I'd like to do that and make a living at having coffee with people. But I have bills to pay. And so when people reach out to me and say, hey, can I pick your brain? I go, great. Here is my menu of services. And if you want to spend time with me, this is how much it is. And people go, oh my God, that's like so mean. And I go, this is a business. And I have to pay for my child to get a Western and that sort of thing. So money is also important.
And that's so interesting, right? I love hearing that you set your priorities, you hold yourself sort of accountable to those, right? And you're right, some of those things are, hey, I've got to pay the bills. That's got to be a priority for you. And then knowing yourself or knowing your true north. So we've only got a few more minutes, and I did want to open it up to if there are any questions in the crowd. I could keep going with talking with these guys for a long time. But does anybody out there have a question you want to ask? And Bridget, if you want to come up, if you've got a question for Bridget too, we can throw something at Bridget. If you've got about how to bring improv into your life. That was the question was, yeah. Does anybody do personal annual plans?
I'm going to jump right in. So the question is, how do you set your personal plan, right? And I, as you might guess, I am very systematic about this. I balance my household budget every month, okay? Once a quarter, and it's the first day of the quarter. Laura, this is not going to shock you, right? The first day of the quarter, I have a reminder in my calendar, and it says, check your priorities. That's all it says. And I just go, am I doing the 4 things that I want? I really like 3, but right now it's 4, because I can't trade off my husband and my kids. So I could put them to family. I'm very systematic about it. And in January of every year, I do an all-up budget review of my household finance and of my business finances. And I also do a priority review where I say, am I still doing the stuff that I really care about? And it's not easy, right? Because it is so tempting to do laundry and go for a walk and call your best friend and do God anything else. But it's super important because many of you are in the same boat that we're in. You have a lot of competing priorities and a lot of competing interests. You know, this is my 3rd career, and I only want to work for another 10 years and then peace out, right? So I want to make sure that wherever I'm spending my time really focuses that time. So quarterly reviews.
I think, so build on that. So for me, clarify purpose, and then values, vision, and mission for our life. And check this with my wife so that we're on the same page with this, and then basically do set 1 year, 5 year, 10-year plan. And I think it's not complicated. I literally have a Google Doc, and I have those reminders for me. And I think the truth is, and I can't recall who said it, maybe it was Jim Rohn, but we're frustrated of what we try to accomplish in a year and surprised by what we can accomplish in 5 years or 10 years. So my vision is really the long game. So if you don't know where to start, I think, and I've heard this on the podcast before, but honestly, I would encourage you to go write your obituary, or you can call it celebration of life or whatever thing to make you feel good. But what is your life? I mean, so for me, I think, and honestly, the only reason I'm here is because of Kelly Hildebrand, and she's a great colleague and a friend and amazing. And she has helped me really start to think that 2-century timeline. And so now starting to think, okay, well, what does 1,000 years look like? And so, that's some big thing that we can't wrap our mind around. So, but I can start with now. And so the one thing, and we're not going to ask, I won't ask us to answer this question, but I would just ask you, how many hours do you have in the entire week? And if we don't know we have 160 hours in the week, then you probably are misusing some time. So start with what you can control now and create an ideal week, which then you can use that for a day-to-day basis, and then we can start to go and say, okay, I wrote my obituary, and this is how I want it to end, and these are the philanthropic things, and I want my kids to remember my name and love me. And the worst thing, I would say this for me, outside of death, the worst thing for me would be that I am successful in the marketplace or professionally, and my kids are like, man, that guy was a jerk. That would be terrible. So in light of that, what do I need to do to prioritize for that? And for me, it was really helpful, tactical, writing my obituary, figure out my ideal week, and then you can start to fill in the middle.
I was looking down at Karen because I go, I got nothing. Sorry, I got nothing. No, I'll tell you what I do. There's two things that are on my mind. One is building a practice where I give my coaches and consultants the life they want to live. And that's a social justice component to my practice, and that we serve our clients. So that is what I want to do. That's my objective. So it never changes. I don't have to plan for it. I know that's what I'm going to do. But the second thing is, I outed myself about something recently to my husband, which was my objective is to build a practice that I can do from anywhere. And you can now. You can pretty much work from anywhere. So in January and February, especially this year, I want to work in La Paz, or I want to work in the Outer Banks, or I want to work somewhere. So it behooves me to do a great job in building a great practice with really awesome coaches and consultants so that I leave it in a great state of affairs so I can live the life I want. And if that's planful and mindful, that's as deep as I get. Sorry.
So real quick, the beauty of that is some of you may need a plan and a life plan, and some of you may not. Some of us are more intuitive and others are not. And so I think if you know your wiring, then you know, like, maybe you need it and not. I wish I was her, right? That would be awesome.
Awesome. Tom, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I have a question for you to start, and that's about giving up your baby and asking for help. I'm wondering the process that you went through when you started to hire people, and the conversations you went through around making sure that your vision was consistent as you started to bring people on, what that experience was like for you as you created something yourself and then had other people start doing some work on your behalf?
That is a great question, because I am really, really crazy tight about what I've created, this model of how to do job search and what a resume should look like, what a Plum resume should look like, what a Plum LinkedIn profile should look like. And I honestly only hired people I really like. And I just had a team meeting, and for those of you who are friends of mine on Facebook, you saw my team meeting ad nauseum, because everyone who works with me is someone I really like, and they all like each other, and I trust them. And then I train them and train them and train them. They observe me doing the coaching, they rehash it. I have a new coach, my first guy hire, and I trained him, and then, for those of you who know Lane Mortensen, and then I trained him again this week, because he went to Europe for a month, and he came back, and I'm like, you need to be trained again. You need to hear it again, because this is the way Plum does it, which is different than any other, sorry, Lee Harrison. It's different than any other way anyone does it, so it's really important to me that it be exactly right. And I guess you'd have to ask Karen what that experience was like.
As one of Laura's first employees at the time, Lora has a brand. So for me, it was scary, right? Because I can't replicate her brand, but I can do enough to understand what's important to Lora, and that's what she emphasizes. And she also gives freedom, right, to do it your way, too. And so I think it's that trust and that encouragement, and it's really your brand of building something that it works for the people that work for her and makes them happy, and therefore they want to give back to her. And I think it's that simple in a way, right?
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, we are at time here, so I want to thank everybody for coming and thank our wonderful panel. And Bridget, thank you guys so much. We're pleased that everybody could come. We hope you learned a thing or two, and we will all be sort of milling around a bit if you've got some, other questions. But thank you all for coming, and listen to the Career Q podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to thecareerq.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles to today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again.
The Career Q podcast is produced by Lens Group Media and recorded at the Riveter in the lovely Seattle, Washington.